The Blaskets are and always have been an intrinsic part of the parish of Dunquin. Even the most casual of observers will notice that the islands and mainland were once one, perhaps a few million years ago. The experts confirm this impression. Locally, the Great Blasket was simply called the island, or more formally, the Western or Great Island. The Blasket Islanders themselves referred to the other islands as the Lesser Blaskets. In the past, the whole group of islands was referred to as Ferreters Islands. From the end of the 13th century, the Ferreter family leased the islands from the Earl of Desmond and from Sir Richard Boyle after the dispossession of the Desmond Geraldines at the end of the 16th century. They retained a castle there at Rin-on-Cashelawn, Castle Point, in the lower village. There is no physical remains of that castle, because the stones were carried off to build the Protestant Soup School in 1840. The school was closed down in 1852 after the ravages of the Great Famine.
No. And what do? You sell them then? Is it to anyone that wants to buy them?
Yes.
Walking through these derelict ruin of once people's homes, it conjures up a sadness. Peg Sayers was an Irish author and an island inhabitant. She moved here to this house after marrying a fisherman and a native. Nowadays, the Great Blasket Island is known for producing a number of fantastic writers. Three of the most notable examples are Tomás Ó Crobán, Peg Sayers, and Murish Ó Suilleabháin. And the ruins behind me on my right shoulder are the remains of his home, Murish Ó Suilleabháin. And he died early in the 50s, and the people then decided, the last of the inhabitants decided to vacate this island, which happened in November 1953. The two-story house you see behind me was owned by the Ó Suilleabháins, the Murish Ó Suilleabháins, and this was the house where the last inhabitants of the Great Blasket Island departed in 1953. Yet another ghostly ruin from the past centuries. The roof has gone missing, some of the beams are exposed, the fireplace is sitting, silently telling tales from another era. The Great Blasket is now classified as a special area of conservation. The last ferreter to control the Blasket Islands was the poet and rebel chieftain, Captain Pirish Ferreter. He was hanged in Killarney in 1653 after he and his followers were defeated at Ross Castle. According to Charles Smith, author of The Ancient and the Present State of the County of Kerry, 1756, the Great Blasket Island was uninhabited prior to about 1710, except for monks in ancient times. A recently discovered document, however, records people living on the Great Blasket Island in 1597. According to popular tradition, The first people to live on the Blasket Islands herded animals, grew crops and hunted. That folk memory must extend a long way back, because the sailboat changed their way of life completely when it made its appearance for the first time on the Blaskets at the beginning of the 19th century or shortly before. With all my drawing, flying and photography and looking around the island for ourselves, we eventually caught up at a guided tour operated by an OPW tour guide. Very interesting. At least he can identify all the skeleton buildings, what they were in the past, the school, the post office, etc, etc. Very interesting facts. So our tour continues. The sailboat gave them the means to take to fishing as a way of life, and they gave up tillage almost completely, apart from growing potatoes, a little oats and some vegetables. The number of people living on the island has ebbed and flowed. There was a population of 150 living on the island in 1840, but after the Great Famine, the population had decreased to 100. It is said that the population reached its peak in 1916 at 176. From then on it was in decline until 1953-54, when the Great Blasket Island was abandoned. The population of the island grew with the influx of tenants evicted from their holdings by Lord Ventry during the first half of the 19th century. Many others followed the same path to the island because the way of life there was far better than what they had to endure on the mainland. Nevertheless, island life was a constant hardship and struggle. A 3-mile crossing to the mainland, followed by a 5-mile walk by road for a priest, or a 12-mile walk to reach the doctor. The islanders survived mainly on fishing, had a few ridges of potatoes, and some oats or rye. Some of them had a cow or two. Others who had none would depend on a drop of milk from a neighbour who had. The land was poor and sandy around their houses, and their own plots were scattered here and there. A year's supply of manure would not go far on the smallest of holdings. The dung had to be supplemented by material from the beach, and sometimes soot from the chimneys was spread on the plots as fertilizer. The mountain was held in common by all the islanders, with turbary rights to hunt rabbits. An unwritten rule was in force regarding the grazing of sheep. 25 sheep for each grazing cow, and the man who did not have a cow was not allowed to graze sheep upon the mountain. Male donkeys only took the place of the horse. They had no use for female donkeys because the land was so steep and precipitous that they would drive each other over the cliffs when in season. I'm taking you down here to see on Trawbawn, the white strand. Today it's basking in glorious sunshine, and there's a big yacht after berthing off the coast there. But normally this beach would be the home of many hundreds of seals, the grey seals. Today all we have are human beings on it, but probably not the right time of the day to locate seals. But as you can see, it's called Antrabon on the Great Blasket Islands. So it's a magnificent place if you get an opportunity to ever get out here. Now, we're very, very lucky today that this weather is divine. It's ideal for sailing because the boats are in and out all day long. Normally it'd be 1 or 2 sailings in the day, sometimes none for weeks on end because of the weather. But get yourself out here because it is a magnificent place. Full of history, full of sadness, but it's part of our heritage. Continuing our adventure, I broke away from the guided tour for a moment. Kate has gone with him. She finds some of the climbing a bit heavy going, but I keep going until I fall down. But hopefully that won't happen. But we climb up here behind the old school and where the old castle was from the 12th century.